Hi, this is Bifflecup from the Triheart podcast. I am in studio alone again because the other boys hate me. And our guest and featured musician today is Aethernaut.
Hey, what's going on?
Aethernaut, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am here with that quality content. Um, well, I am a violinist. I write chiptunes, and other styles of music. I also write video game music and do sound design, and I play a lot of video games. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much my life in a nutshell.
Tell us about the I'm interested in what games you worked on, but tell us a little bit about the Aethernaut sound. Like, tell us about the Aethernaut identity.
Okay. Started, I want to say, oh gosh, like 10 years ago now. I had never heard of chiptune before, and a friend of mine introduced me to the genre, well, the style, I should say, with this compilation that he had, and it had Bit Shifter, Anamanaguchi, Null Sleep, a lot of OG people on it, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe that people were doing this, and it just brought a lot of like nostalgic feelings and a lot of joy. It sparked joy. Um, so I looked into how I could do it myself, and at this point, I didn't really know where to look as far as resources, and I didn't know exactly how they were doing it. Like I didn't know where to get LSDJ or any of that. So I kind of just like I worked with what I had and figured out kind of how to do it on my own. So that I use Reason as my DAW. I figured out how to do it in Reason, and I grew accustomed to that. And then as I actually wrote more of it and put my stuff out and talked to other people that are into the scene, I learned more about how they're doing it, and my resource pool grew, and I knew where to look from that point on for other ways of writing chiptune or sample packs or tutorials, all that stuff. So then I found Famine Tracker and latched onto that one pretty quickly. Yeah, I really like Famine Tracker a lot, and I use that in conjunction with Reason for a lot of my stuff.
So like when I first heard chiptune, I also Anime Naguchi was one of my first introductions to it through the Scott Pilgrim game.
Oh my God,
Um, so I had
it's
that
so
like
good.
visual. Oh, dude, it's so good. But I had that like visual pairing of like chiptune, so I could see color and movement and energy through the music. What did you see when you first heard chiptune? Like what was it that drew you in? You said nostalgia.
Yeah, that drew me all the way back to when I was a kid. It drew me back all the way to like my first video game system that I ever owned, which was a Sega Master System. And it brought back all of the memories that I had from playing games on the system. And sometimes I would sit there, let the game play, and just like listen to the music. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm sure plenty of people have done that. But yeah, like the music in old games was like some of my favorite parts about the games.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me all these years. And when, I finally heard what people have been doing, it just like, I don't know, it felt like something I wanted to belong to, you know?
Right. I remember like gosh, I must have been in like first grade, and I was just raised by my mom, and she would leave early to go to work before I left for school. So there was like
Mhm.
this period of a time in the day that I would play Mega Man 2 every
Yeah.
day. And I know what you mean. I have just this one memory of like playing Crash Man, which is like where you climb the ladders and it becomes day to night. You're like climbing the ladders and it becomes nighttime, or you like get into space. Was there like a specific memory for you? What was the song you played over and over again when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, oh my gosh, it's so hard to choose. It's so hard. But one game that was pretty solid from beginning to end as far as the music was Black Belt for the Sega Master System, which
Oh,
was
okay.
like, yeah, it was like an American version of Hotu no Ken for the Famicom. And oh man, the music in that was so good. It was so good. It was oh, how do I describe it? Had that like late 80s, early 90s feel. It's yeah, that particular soundtrack stuck with me a lot. Also, the music for Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap, that had an amazing soundtrack as well. Yeah, and those I would listen to pretty much all the time.
So
Yeah.
you've got chiptune, you've got reason. Okay, and then so now how do we incorporate violin into that? How did that happen?
So when I was starting to write chiptune, I was probably in like the middle of my first album and was trying to find out how I would perform this stuff live. I started out with a keyboard actually. I wanted to give people something to look at while I was performing, something that was like visually stimulating. I wanted to be able to showcase some of my live instrumentation. So I went the MIDI route and I started with a keyboard. And then I was like, well, this is great, but there's more I want to do, and my keyboard skills aren't really like as good as my violin skills. And I thought, well, hey, I could do this with a MIDI violin, right? So I contacted this one company called Electric Violin Lutery. And I think they're based out of New York. But I talked to them about building a custom violin that had MIDI capabilities. And I found this Creative Commons design, which is the design that you know about that you see in the violin. It's that like very pixelated, boxy sort of design. So they were able to use that, and they also gave it MIDI capabilities. They put a pickup that goes into the bridge so that each each individual string has its own pickup. And there's like a little space on the side for a 9-volt battery. It's pretty funny. Um, yeah, but yeah. So then I also looked into getting a pitch to MIDI converter, and that helped streamline the whole thing a lot. I have a Sonus I2M, and it doesn't even need to take a MIDI cable, which I initially thought I would need. It just takes audio input through a quarter-inch jack, and it does all the work.
Oh man, I remember seeing that your violin, which hopefully people will look up. It's like a pixelated violin. And I spent so long on Amazon and the internet trying to like find where you bought that violin. And I was like, I need it too. So when I finally met you last year, I was like, so where did you get that? I was like, I want my time back. It was not fair. But you're also incorporating. You're like even going further. You're like incorporating voice or I don't know, faux voice or like into your music. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so after having done this for I think about 10 years now, I would like to kind of evolve my sound a bit. I mean, and if you go through my discography from beginning to end, you can definitely see how I progressed and how it's changed by itself. Now I'm at a point where I would like to change it even more. So, and that includes adding more vocals, probably more Vocaloid in there too. I would like to add more acoustic instrumentation or analog instrumentation, so more violin, probably add some guitars back in there, more keyboard. I also want to add a pretty heavy sound design aspect to it. I would like to do a lot more field recording and more sound engineering to put that into it. So that would be something to look forward to for the future.
So what do you think has changed? Not necessarily like instrumentation or tech wise, or even skill wise, but what do you think philosophically has changed between you on your first album and you now? Like, what do you know now that you didn't know then?
Philosophically, I would say that my aim and my goal for writing chiptune is way different than when I first started. When I first started, it was trying to encapsulate that nostalgic feeling. I was trying to basically keep it within the video game realm. So, that first album I wrote it's a concept album, as if each song was a level in the game, a game that doesn't exist. And then I started to kind of just branch out a little bit from there with all of the following EPs that I put out. And with my last release, Heaven is Light, I think I had a lot more emphasis on trying to, I wouldn't necessarily say mainstream the chip sound, but I would say kind of give it a different focus.
I think I know what you mean, like popularize or make it more like digestible or accessible.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I've never been I've never been a purist. Yeah, I don't know. It's not that it's a bad sound, it's great. It's just not my style. My electronic music experience has always been in digital audio workstations, so like stations like Reason, or back in the day I used to use Cakewalk, and back when FL Studio was actually called Fruity Loops, I used that, and I used Sonic Foundry Acid, which has undergone company changes multiple times, but each one of those DAWs has allowed me to use many different tracks and channels, and I've been able to layer a lot of things. And a lot of my influences, having come from a classical music background, is rooted in layers. But at the same time, I also have had experience with limited layers. Like I used to be in a chamber group, which was just a quartet, right? So there were four instruments. You had, pieces that you would play, some that had like bigger sound, all because the composer wrote it that way, that could come out of just four instruments. So that also appealed to me, but the majority of my experience and my attention has gone to creating a lot of layers and a lot of detailed tracks.
What? Okay, this is a quick question, and then I want to go into other things.
Okay.
What is a classical piece that has inspired Aethernaut the most?
The most. Oh my God, you are asking tough questions.
I told you
Um,
I don't fuck around, Daniel.
yeah, yeah, you weren't kidding. Oh, I mean, I'm just going through like my list of classical music that I just generally enjoy, and like going down the list and seeing if like any of that applies here. I will say Samuel Barber's Violin Concerto
Nice.
was it's what probably like one of my favorite, if not my favorite, violin concerto. Um, and I really enjoyed his style, and so that has played some influence. I definitely have a huge Baroque influence. I love Baroque music. That period was probably, yeah, that was the best for me. Bach, Vivaldi, um, they all played a huge influence. Um, and I played a lot of those pieces growing up. It was part of the Suzuki method. Um, God, it's so hard to narrow it down to just one piece.
That's super interesting because you are obviously like leveled enough for those composers, but you don't sound anything like those composers.
No, I do not. Um,
So, which is awesome. No, I love that.
I I would like to put in more of my classical influence in there, which is, I guess, part of why I'm evolving my sound. The things I put out previously have been very inspired and colored by my love of video games and electronic music in general, so that kind of took precedence in my writing style. Um, and now that I'm going to be changing things a bit more, I would like a lot of my roots to shine through now.
So, one thing I wanted to come back to was you said you're not a purist. So, what's a purist and why are you not a purist?
Well, I suppose, some people feel that chiptune is one set thing, that like you have to write it with old hardware, so you have to use a Game Boy or a Genesis or what have you, or that you have to stay within the limits of 4 channels or whatever channels are afforded you. And I mean, I get that it could be a technical challenge, and some people thrive off of that, and that's fine. I'm not saying anything bad against purist music, but the mentality has a it has a knack for becoming toxic rather quickly. People start to gatekeep and say that, chiptune has to be this, and you're not part of the club if you don't write it like this. And um, I mean, enough people have imposter syndrome. I know I suffered from it for a very long time. And I mean, like, if you want a community to be healthy and inclusive, and you want it to grow because you love it, then actually treat it like you love it and allow other people to enjoy chiptune as well. It's not just like for one type of person. It belongs to everybody.
Could you give an example of somebody not letting someone else enjoy chip music because of purity?
Off the top of my head, I'd have to kind of think a little bit.
That's all right.
I mean, if you enter a forum, like, I'm sure there are people in the chiptune subreddit. Well, like, if somebody shares a track and they're like, "Hey, I really like this," and I like the beat or whatever, and a purist may come along and be like, "Oh, that's not chiptune. That's whatever. Fill in the blank because it's not made on a Game Boy, or it sounds too processed or whatever." The person who posted their track isn't going to feel good about, having shared something that they found or either made themselves, or, it breaks people down. It breaks down their self-esteem. It breaks down a sense of community. It's not like a specific example. It's kind of just like a made up one, but
No,
I'm
I kind
sure.
of like that. You could apply what you're saying to the so many different events that I've been to. Like, I see that rhetoric at different events I
Yeah,
go to.
but if you hold on to that sort of mentality, it also opens the door to other types of gatekeeping or naysaying, or then hate groups start forming or entering in, and then it becomes not even about chiptune anymore. It becomes an issue of race, gender, or anything, any sort of hot topic. So it snowballs and it grows into something that just like has no place in the scene.
You had just said that you experienced imposter syndrome, which to me, as like your fan or like someone who actively listens to you, is like to me, in my view, that's preposterous because you are like so cool. I look up to you. You destroy the stage. But so with that
Well,
in
thank you.
mind, with that in mind, from my point of view, tell me about your experience. Like, what do you mean you have imposter syndrome, and what is that like?
It started from the time I started to share my work publicly. So I would write chiptune and release the album, start sharing it, start talking to people about it, trying to get into the scene, trying to make friends, and um, experience this with other people. And it looked at first it looked like a lot of internal worry, sometimes external worry that people wouldn't like my music because it wasn't done with a Game Boy or it wasn't done with hardware. And of course, that sort of fear is just it's made worse by gatekeeping when you experience it. And sometimes, like if you're at a listening party or something, and then it's a like a mixed hour, so you have a whole variety show of people being played, and then your track that you submitted is going to be played, and you hear it, and then chat goes silent, or or like nobody really has anything to comment on it, and it's like, well, oh, great. Is it because of this? Is it because of that? Is it because of this? And it just gets out of hand. And I experienced a lot of that in the beginning, and sad to say, I actually let that fester for a long time, and it became a lot of self-doubt and anxiety, and it actually brought down my productivity by a huge margin. I wasn't putting out as much music or playing as many shows as I would have liked. Um, and it kind of evolved into like, oh, well, now people probably don't want to go to my shows or see my live performances because I'm not using a Game Boy, or because I'm not, you know, because I'm not a hacking genius, or I don't know how to program. Um, so it starts to encapsulate different aspects of your life if you don't address it right away, and you know, you don't address the root of the problem. I've spent a lot of time internalizing things, and not really speaking out on it, but hopefully we as a people are starting to normalize talking about um, mental health and the things that go on inside our heads. And I've been seeing a lot of memes pop up, chiptune memes that are speaking exactly what I'm feeling, and it makes me feel good, and it makes me it inspires me to continue writing the music I want to write, regardless of what anyone thinks.
But you did just come out with an album, so how did you work through what you were feeling with imposter syndrome? How did you work through that? Like, what were the steps you took to get back onto writing music and releasing music?
It's a daily struggle, I'll say. It's definitely not easy, and it's very easy to get discouraged because of it. But really, it comes down to writing what you want to hear, and regardless of what anyone else is going to think. Of course, as a musician, you want people to like your music, but if you're trying to garner the attention of a particular people, it's likely going to end up not so good.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's the idea of like, hey, senpai, notice me. Like you want the attention of your of the people that you look up to, right? Like we have a tendency to idolize people for one reason or another, and if there's a chance, like especially in a niche group thing like chiptune, where your idols are a lot closer to you than you think, sometimes people want to go for that. They want to get the attention of their peers. They want to get the attention of their idols. And I know that I certainly have done that. And it has played into my imposter syndrome as well. Like, if there's a chance someone that I admire and look up to in the scene could see my show or hear my music, it's very flattering. And if you don't get the response that you're expecting or would like to have, then it's another hit to your self-esteem, or you start questioning your work again, like do they not like it because it's not on a Game Boy, or do they not
Right.
like it because of, like, whatever the reason is. If you can start the work to undo that sort of mentality and kind of get back to writing music because you love it and because you are writing what you want to hear, that goes a long way and it's very powerful. And I just want to say this to anyone listening. If you feel this way, you are absolutely not alone. And you can talk to anyone. You can talk to me. You can talk to anyone about this if you're feeling this way, and we will help you as we can.
What do you think of this? So last week we had Earl from Pixel Journalism, who kind of like is a documentarian for chiptune and nerd scene and stuff like that. So I was kind of asking him like, as an observer, as a documentarian, what do you see in like the chiptune world and stuff like that? And he said the best artists are the ones with the lowest self-esteems.
I think that has some value um, to it, and but not even just in this scene. It's art in general. Um, I mean, you take a look at some of the greatest painters or the greatest composers, and you read a biography about them, and you see that they had a lot of troubles. I think that's kind of just part of artist life for one reason or another. I don't know why, but I would say that there is some truth to his statement.
So, okay, so this is kind of a interesting concept. So, a couple of weeks ago, we had Rainbow Trash, who is so smart, just like you, and she was like telling us that LSDJ and chiptune is a queer genre, not necessarily attached to LGBTQ, but definitely not attached to like white cis male status quo. So if chiptune is kind of like a queer genre, can you kind of help me navigate like gatekeeping the status quo of a queer genre?
I have not actually heard this before. Um, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think like queer like weird, like it is a weird not status quo instrumentation.
Yeah, really, that to me just means that there's absolutely no excuse for gatekeeping. Right? Like, if this is a queer genre, then it's purely self-expression. How are you going to tell someone how to create art? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense at all. So, yeah, gatekeeping has no place. It just has no place in this genre.
What is fake bit?
Fake bit is a term that I have heard many times come up that basically describes something that sounds like chiptune but was not done with hardware or possibly a tracker. And I'm sure some hardcore purists out there would be like, "Oh, using a tracker isn't pure chiptune either. Like you have to use hardware." So yeah, there are some artists out there that were probably labeled as fake bit, or more recently that I've heard 9-bit, which I love a lot, and actually I'm going to start saying that my music is 9-bit. It's a term that I've heard used to denote music that was written with like a modern DAW, or
Right.
layered with new stuff. So I'm pretty cool with that. I like it.
Do you think there's an artist out there that's been labeled as fakebit, who's been kind of like swept under the rug because they're not pure, that deserves a second listening right now?
I mean, I'm sure there are tons. It's a very I mean, it's been around long enough now that there are so many artists that are writing chiptune in various forms. I'm very, very bad at like picking out examples on the spot. So I'll think about it and drop some names.
So I wanted to switch gears into Elijah McClain because, especially with you, because you are a violinist who Elijah McClain was also a violinist, and you live 30 minutes away from Elijah McClain. And so you're in this hot spot. To me, you're like in this very interesting geographical and like identical position, and I wanted to ask you about Elijah McClain.
When I first heard about what happened, it was through Twitter, actually. Twitter seems to be the source of real news in current times. And I heard that they were doing violin vigils to honor him. And I haven't been to one, sadly. I interact with people that are autoimmune, that have autoimmune diseases, so I can't really take a risk in going to large gatherings. But if I would, I could, especially, hearing his story and hearing that he was a violinist and seeing people play at these vigils. It's very heartbreaking. And to hear how the Aurora police have been handling the situation in extremely poor taste. I don't know. I would like to actually I'm gonna say this here now. I would like to dedicate my next album to Elijah McClain.
One thing that, like, one rhetoric I've been seeing on the internet is like, all victims of police brutality are sting and like they're horrible and they're disgusting, but for some reason this one hits different. Did you have any thoughts about like that statement?
I mean, I can understand why it would hit a little bit harder than others. I mean, from what I understand of Elijah, he was very very calm. I mean, loved animals, played violin to animals. Would visit. Sorry, I have my dog. Hey, okay, here, calm down. Yeah. And just a very peaceful man, and to hear what had happened to him, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I mean, all of these incidences are terrible. But I mean, he was on his way to an animal shelter, like
Yeah.
to play with kittens. Like, come on. I don't know. It's I find it hard to like speak on things like this.
It is really hard. And to me, like, to me, Elijah McClain really did hit different because he was so like, in the way we were talking about like queer, like played violin for kittens to soothe them, and like just some pictures. He just reminds me of like somebody that I might see at an anime con, or
Right.
yeah, he just feels like someone that I know, that I've
Right.
seen before, who's kind of like, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw him at a chiptune show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, and I mean, like in every photo that I've seen of him, he's just smiling, and it's a
Yeah.
completely genuine smile. And someone like that, you just like you would be able to easily talk to, easily become friends with.
Why do you want to dedicate your next album to him?
Well, hearing his story, hearing that he's a violinist and that he was just a genuine, caring, and loving person, and having seen video of these violin vigils, because that seemed to be one of the things that he's going to be remembered the most for.
Hmm.
Um, his being a violinist. I want to dedicate this, next album to him, not just for that, not for the fact that we both shared a passion for violin and music, but I think also lyrically, I want to start speaking my mind a bit more, be it politics or social justice or things that need to be said or that I would like to say.
Are there any composition ideas that you could talk to now? Like, are you writing a song with vocals?
Currently, not yet. There's a couple small projects that I need to take care of first, but I will be collecting lyrical ideas as they come to me. I'll write it down in a notebook and stuff. Start to parse them out when I'm actually in front of my computer. But I do know that it's going to be kind of heavy on that front, at least for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, historically speaking, like my music has either been purely instrumental or whatever vocals I have either been like really lighthearted and playful or just like about love and, the usual stuff. So I think this is going to be the first time that I actually allow my music to speak on heavier topics and personal struggles that I've gone through, that sort of thing.
So you and I, we actually had a really interesting conversation online about Wendy Carlos, who to me is like the a godmother of chiptune. And I thought it was so interesting because she is transgender and she is very different. If you go on her website, she's just mad interesting and she is different. And I think her, I mean, only a different person like Wendy Carlos could come up with the music that she created. So, do you think that you're different, and do you think that that goes into your music?
I would say I'm different. I would say that it kind of comes naturally to be different. I've been a contrarian and counterculture like my entire life. And that all stems from coming out when I was 19 to like reinventing myself completely because I grew up in a very conservative Christian home and went to church and had a certain set of friends that all went to the same church. And when I was 19, I started to challenge all of those beliefs and because like a lot of what I was being taught goes against the very way that I want to live my life, and I had enough. So, came out, stopped going to church, reinvented myself, reinvented my group of friends, questions literally everything, and I that sort of mentality kind of stuck with me. And even before that, I was into the punk scene. I listened to a lot of music that my peers didn't listen to. I was always drawn to like weird stuff. Like I like a lot of different kinds of electronic music, and I mean that includes like Aphex Twin, Square Pusher, all the people that were on like Warp Records and very experimental stuff. Chris Clark, um, they to me pushed the boundaries of what I knew electronic music to be. Because I think up until that point, when I first started hearing stuff like that, all I knew about electronic music was like poppy dance tracks,
Yeah.
or like Aqua.
Who's great?
I mean, I love Aqua, but but that's all I knew, Like
Yeah.
that was my only exposure to it. Um, so then, hearing people like Chris Clark do very, very strange things with rhythms and different instruments, or creating like manipulating voices and instruments into, to create new ones and weird, weird sounds. It just like was super appealing to me. And as far as I knew, I didn't know anybody else my age that listened to that sort of stuff. And then, fast forward a little bit further to when I came out when I was 19 and reinvented my friend group. I came across some people that had, the freedom to listen to basically whatever they wanted to listen to, and it turned out we had a lot of overlap in that area. And so, I got to actually talk about things that I liked as far as that goes, like the weird stuff that I would listen to and other bands that I would listen to. But, finding camaraderie and like in the weird spaces was um I lost my train of thought. That's amazing. That happens to me a lot, by the way. So the fact that this has only happened once so far in this interview is really amazing.
You've been killing this interview.
It's
I'm like, sometimes I like ask questions and I'll be like, if anyone asked me this question, I would just be like, uh. Oh man, it's way easier on my end.
yeah. Um, so let's see if I can actually steer this back to the main topic.
Okay.
Um, if I think your question was, do you think I consider myself to be different? When I write music, there were two things that have remained the same from like since I was 14, and that was I want to hear this sort of sound or this melody or something specific about music that I don't think exists yet. So I'll create it. Um, So creating what I have perceived to be uncreated yet, I mean, and it turns out that it's not always the case. Like maybe it was just like a deeply ingrained like inspiration from something I've heard somewhere else or whatever. But at least at least I got it out of my head. And the other thing that has remained the same is, I'm writing what I want to hear. I'm writing what I like, and if other people like it, great. If they don't, that's fine too. And I think it takes that sort of, I don't know if I want to call it courage. Really, it's just like a factual thing. Like, sure, I mean, I like it when other people like what I do, but that's not a factor when I write my music. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I write what I like. But I mean, I feel like it might possibly be a little easier for me because I think throughout my life I've kind of just drifted from group to group because I like so many different things. It's not like I only got along with the goth crowd or the punk crowd or what have you. I like punk music. I like some industrial. I like a lot of everything. And so I kind of just I don't know. I guess I've always kind of just felt like a drifter.
Hmm.
And as such, like my mentality is, well, so I'm writing this for me. And if other people want to join me along on this train ride, then sure. The minute I start taking other people's ideas into consideration is the minute that it no longer becomes mine.
Right.
And it may sound like, I don't know, I'm sure to some people out there it might sound kind of like selfish or egotistical, but it's not. I mean, like if I'm actually trying to learn a new technique or something, I'm all ears. I love tutorials. I really do. Like half my time when I'm writing music is watching tutorials on YouTube. But like if I'm looking for constructive criticism, I will listen. Or, if I'm trying to learn a new technique or something like that. But if the discussion is about an artistic choice, I'm not going to seek out anyone else's opinion because it's not their piece. It's not for them. It's
Right.
mine. It's my own. And I think as an artist, you kind of have to be a little bit selfish sometimes,
Right.
and it's okay.
I wanted to get this out now so we don't miss it. Is where do people find you on the internet?
On the internet, I am all over the internet. If you're on Facebook, I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I am on Twitter. I am probably there most of the time I'm on the internet. But I'm also, you can find my music itself on Bandcamp. You can find it on basically anywhere. Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify is a big one. Yeah, so anywhere that you try to find music, I'm most likely going to be there because of my distributor.
It sounds like 19 was like a turning point for you where you kind of started doing things your own way instead of like trying to live by church or what you like call your Christian family. But is there something like from 0 to 19 that you take with you now?
I mean, the two things that are, I mean, this is why I latched on to chiptune when I first heard about it so quickly. It's because the two things that I can say immediately without even hesitating is that the two things that I took with me this whole time are music and video games. From 0 to 19 to now, those are the two things that have been consistently in my life in great capacity. And when I came across chiptune, that was like the culmination of my two loves together in the same place, you know? Yeah, so those two things were with me every step of the way.
And then another question I have is like, what was like the most counterculture thing that you did? Like for me, maybe one would be like when I was 21, I ran away to Los Angeles.
I mean, back when I was I think around like 19, 18, yeah, 18, 19, 20, I was starting to really get into anime and I was really into Japanese street fashion. And I would dress in whatever weirdest way I possibly could. I would actually started to like make my own clothes. I had this pair of sleeves that I would wear from the elbow down. I did my hair in whatever crazy way I possibly could think of. In fact, I spent like 3 hours making my hair look like Cloud's hair from Final Fantasy. And I had these big honking shoes, like massive shoes, platforms that were from this company called Swear Alternative back in the day. So I don't know if you've seen Swear shoes, but like they look like big honking anime platforms, like wide base, just really outlandish looking. It was amazing. I would wear those everywhere I went, and I had these like really tight, skinny, like jeans that just flared out at the bottom, and I wore like five belts crisscrossing each other, and just like, so I was very visually different from a lot of people, especially when I still lived in the suburbs of Chicago in Arlington Heights. It's weird. I the last time I went to visit there, it's like a time capsule. It's like people never changed. So I was always like, I always wanted to be like visually different, I guess. And before that, I think when I was 14, and I was starting to hit a rebellious phase with my parents, my 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 form of protest was joining a team. How does that work? I
Joining
joined the
a team?
yeah, I joined the gymnastics team when I was 14 in
Nice.
high school, and yeah, it was just ridiculous. Like I did it because my parents did want me to, because if I broke a bone or something, I couldn't play the violin, I couldn't play the piano, and I was like, oh yeah, well I'm doing it anyway. So I joined the gymnastics team. Other than that, I wouldn't say I've done anything super outlandish. And I think that's partly due to like my struggle with mental health. Like for years had um I dealt with a lot of major depression and anxiety, and I never sought professional help or did anything about it until like literally decades later. And I think a lot of that has kind of, I mean, it shaped me into who I am now, but I certainly think I could have done with some help earlier. But as a result, it made me not want to, it made me not want to do anything so outlandish that I would lose anything else, I just like I internalized a lot, and I held everything in. So, I mean, I don't know. That was such a long time ago now. I feel so much better now.
All right, last question goes to Herb. Herb asks, "What is your favorite anime?" And then my addition to that is why.
Oh my gosh, this is also a tough one. Why are you asking me such tough questions, man? Gosh, my favorite anime of all time. That is such a tough question. Um, can I just say one that I'm currently in love with?
Let me check with Herb.
Okay.
Herb says yes. I
Okay.
would have said no, but yes.
I mean, if you haven't learned this already, you'll very quickly learn that it's very hard for me to choose a one favorite of anything. Um, but anyway, so I'm currently really in love with Food Wars, also
Oh,
known
nice.
as Shokugeki no Soma, um, because it's an anime about food, and I really love food. But also it's really well written. It's hilarious, and very expressive, and yeah, the way that they cook is, of course, anime food is like the most beautiful thing on the planet. But yeah, I really love that one. I've gotten into a couple, what's the genre, like the video game ones that were like people end up in another world of in some way or another. Those are kind of entertaining. The Devil is a Part-Timer is also a really funny one if you haven't seen that one. Uh, that one is just plain hilarious. Some classics. Obviously, Akira is a great classic. I actually really enjoyed Metropolis too, which was done by the creator of Astro Boy. That was a fantastic anime, very beautifully done. Let's see, Vampire Hunter D was fantastic. I really, really like that one. Berserk was great. And there's a couple Shonen Jump ones that I like too. Like I actually did get into Naruto for a long time. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard for me to choose just one thing. Maybe I should work on that. That sounds like something I should be able to do. It's like a good life skill to have. Like pick one color, one food.
You are awesome, Aethernaut. I will. Any final thoughts on your end?
On my end. I mean, this is probably the most like hard-hitting interview I've ever had. So thank you for having put this together.
Oh, you're the best.
Final thoughts. If anybody out there would like to chat with me personally, you could just find me on Twitter. It's at Aethernaut is dead. That's DED. And yeah, just shoot me a message. I will reply. I'm pretty fast at replying. But yeah, if you have any questions about chiptune, about music writing in general, or sound design, or what my favorite anime will be in 5 years, just yeah, shoot me a question. I'm more than happy to talk with new people. So